Just gonna see if everybody can see me and hear me. Oh, I see somebody on. Couple people. Hi guys, can you guys see me and hear me okay? Yay! Seeing some hearts. Awesome! Hi Paul! Perfect. Everything sounds good? Just gonna pop you up on my iPad down here. Perfect. Make sure my volume's down. Hi Kim. Okay, perfect. Can you guys hear me okay? Go ahead and get started. Awesome. Hello everybody. I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much to Paul and David for this awesome opportunity. I'm so excited about CakeFlix Live TV. It is such a cool idea. I know because I mostly travel and I go to cake shows and teach classes, and I'm so used to getting to see all of my cake and sugar friends so often that this is definitely hard not to be able to see everybody, but I love watching live streams and I love being a part of live streams, and I just think that this is such a great idea, and I'm so excited to be having my own show on CakeFlix Live TV. So on Wednesdays every week at 8 p.m. UK time, I'm gonna have Sidney's Sweet Adventures is what I'm calling it, and I'm really excited. Now remember that we're doing this tonight, which is a Wednesday, but we are not going to start next week. We're going to start the week after. So this whole week and next week, you're going to see lots of previews every day at 8 o'clock UK of all the different awesome artists, which I'm super excited about. I've been loving watching all of the amazing talent. But the week after next is when we're going to start the weekly shows. So if you want to tune back into my show, Sidney's Sweet Adventures, make sure to come back week after next, and I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of different stuff. So I've been in the sugar world for about 13 years now. I specialize in Isomalt, casting, pulling, blown sugar, but I'm also a professional chocolatier, and I'm a cake designer as well, and I like to use a whole bunch of different sugar things, sugar range of mediums. So in my show, I'm going to be super excited to show you guys lots of different sugar related things. So we're going to do chocolate, cake, and of course a whole bunch of Isomalt, which is what I'm going to be showing you guys today. And now eventually too, like I said, I do travel a lot, so when I am able to go back out on the road and travel again, I'm definitely going to take you guys with me. So when I go to cake shows, cake conventions, classes, different places all over the world, I'm going to take you guys with me through this show. So I hope that you are just as excited as I am, and I hope that I will see you there. But yeah, today I'm going to be showing you some Isomalt work. So I'm going to do just kind of an introduction to different kinds of Isomalt techniques. I have my sculpture right down here that I'm going to show you. Let me just carefully pick it up here. So this would be an awesome cake topper. It would be a great centerpiece, or of course you can dissect all of the different techniques and use them for different projects. This is all Isomalt, the whole entire thing. All of the bubbles, the seahorses, and the waves and coral that are crashing around it. This is all going to be Isomalt. So that is what I'm going to show you guys how to make today. And I really like this project and the techniques in this project because it looks really showy and really impressive and just kind of really cool and abstract, but it's really easy, okay? So that is one of my favorite kinds of things to do, is when something's super easy but looks really impressive. So that is the techniques that I'm going to show you. We're going to be doing all cast Isomalt today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys down, so it'll just take a second. Bear with me as I reposition you guys down onto my mat. Alright. So I am just going to take a second. I have my iPad set up next to me. So if you guys have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Alright, so I'm just going to move my mat up here a little bit so that you guys can see. Let me move this guy out of the way. Okay. Perfect. Alright. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I will be going through because I do have my iPad, like I said, set up next to me so I can go through. But while I'm working too, I also have both my parents are here, and they can read out some questions as well if there's anything that I may have missed. And I'll go back through the chat as well afterwards to catch anything that I may miss during the live. So we are going to be using Isomalt today, like I said. Let's make sure. Okay, so this is the Isomalt that I'm going to be using today. This is Sidney Isomalt. This is my brand of pre-cooked Isomalt that's ready to use. So it's all pre-cooked and tempered. All you have to do is melt it. Now you can use your own cooked Isomalt. You have to temper Isomalt from a raw powder if you get it in the raw form. I have my recipe listed on my website on the tutorials page if you guys are interested in learning how to cook it from a raw form. This is the same recipe that I'm using for this. So this is what I'm using. Since it is already in a hard candy form, all you have to do is melt it. So I'm just popping it in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals. So I'm going to do that while I am talking to you guys. All right. So 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it's a liquid, and that is going to melt it down. Now remember that Isomalt is very hot. It's about 300 degrees Fahrenheit while you're working with it, so make sure that you don't stick your finger in it, you don't touch it, you want it to wear your gloves. I usually recommend a cotton glove and then a nitrile or a latex glove over top of that, and that double glove is really going to protect your hands nicely. So that is what I recommend. My hands do not feel heat anymore from working with this for so many years, so it's easier for me to demonstrate without the gloves for you guys, but definitely protect your hands. All right, I'm going to pop that back in for another second and then tell you about what we are going to start with. So the first thing, I'm going to start with kind of the techniques that are going to take the longest. So I'm starting out actually with my bubbles. Now there's a couple different ways to do the bubbles that are on the sculpture. Of course you can blow them, so you can use your sugar pump and you can do blown pieces. I am going to go over blowing in a future episode. I have tons of different ideas of different blown projects that I'm going to show you guys in different episodes, but I wanted to start off a little bit simpler and still keep it in with casting. So I'm going to pour into a mold. So this is my little silicone sphere mold. Okay, this is one that is from my line of products, but you can use any silicone mold as long as it's food safe, of course, and high heat. So as long as it goes up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, you should be able to use it with Isomalt. So this is just a silicone mold of a sphere, and I'm going to pour the Isomalt in and create a hollow bubble. So first what I'm going to do is just rubber band. Okay, so I'm just double looping my rubber bands on the top and on the bottom. Just like that, make sure it's all nice and lined up. And then I'll grab my Isomalt from the microwave.
Sidney, somebody's asking where did you get your jug, and I'm assuming the cups.
The bowls that I'm using to melt the Isomalt is going to be a silicone bowl. These specific ones are from Pampered Chef in the US, but I know you can get like silicone measuring cups, small silicone pinch bowls. Anything silicone is going to work best, just like with the molds, because it's going to release super easy. Okay, so you can see now in my Isomalt, I am using a color here. I'm not just using the clear. The clear would be beautiful, but I wanted to add a little bit of opacity to this so that it pops really, really nicely. So I'm using this beautiful kind of pearl, so almost a little bit of an ivory tint to it, and that is going to make the bubbles pop rather than being clear and seeing right through them to the coral in the back. Since that's such a busy background, I wanted something that's really going to stand out. So I'm going to pour the Isomalt right into the mold, so you can see there's a hole here. I'm just going to fill it all the way to the top, and of course you could just fill this up, let it cool, and then you have a sphere, right? But that's going to be a solid sphere. That's going to be super heavy. It's going to take a lot of product, and it's going to be a little bit harder to eat if you were going to be putting this onto a cake. So what I'm going to actually do is make this hollow by pouring the excess back out into my bowl, just like you would do with chocolate to create shells for bonbons. I'm going to create a shell. So I'm just pouring the excess Isomalt back out into the bowl. I'm going to scrape the excess off. Now I'm going to do this once more so that I have a double layer. So that is just going to make it a little bit stronger. You don't have to wait in between layers because the mold was cool. So the first layer is already cool from touching the outside walls of the sphere. Okay, so I filled it up, and then immediately I'm going to pour it back out one more time and just really make sure that all of my excess is drained out, because this is upside down right now, right? Because the bottom is going to be the hole that it has at the base. So if I flip it over too soon, any excess could pool at the top and your bubbles will be top heavy. So I just want to make sure that I let all the excess drain out. Then I'll flip it back over and I'll allow this to cool. I'm going to pop back in, I preheated my Isomalt a little bit, but I'm going to pop back in some of my colors that we're going to use next while I let this drain. Now I'm just using a microwave to heat up my Isomalt since it is already pre-cooked. I don't worry about temperatures, recipes, nothing. You can also use the stovetop if you prefer, or if that's all you have, you can just start it at low and slowly bring the temperature up. Alright, so I can see that there's pretty much no more excess drained. Or no more excess left in the mold. It's all drained. So I'm going to flip this back over and let this cool for probably about 20-25 minutes or so at room temperature. So it's going to cool a lot faster than the solid one would as well, which is another positive to doing hollow pieces. So we will just set this guy over off to the side while we work on some other stuff. Okay, so I'm going to pop my other Isomalt back into the microwave as well. So we're going to be using some beautiful kind of a turquoise teal color and a blue. So what I wanted to mention too, what I didn't say before with the Isomalt, is how to color it. Again, I'm planning on doing an entire intensive video on all the different ways you can color and paint on Isomalt, but the easiest way to do it is just to use an edible airbrush color. So I just took the clear Isomalt and I melted it down and then added in some edible airbrush color. That's going to give you this beautiful transparent color. So this is just like a turquoise. I think I added a tiny bit of yellow into it as well just to make it a nice pretty color. And then for the shimmery effect of this pearlescent color I used before, that's just pearl dust. So it's just adding luster dust into the Isomalt.
Sidney, Alexis would like to know, do you suggest using an expensive Isomalt or a cheap one?
The Isomalt that I am using, like I said, is Seahorse Isomalt, so it's going to be kind of the, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but this is going to be a really high quality Isomalt as far as the granule. So if you are cooking it yourself, you just want to make sure that wherever you're getting it from does not thin down the Isomalt, or it doesn't add fillers or anything into it. And the best way to do that is to just test them. I obviously know that this one is not going to get yellow, it's not going to burn as easily as some of the other ones that I've tried. So I mean, obviously the higher the price, generally the cost is, or the quality is going to be better, just like with anything. Alright, so I brought my Isomalt to a boil, so you can see with these clear colors, when it comes to a boil and it's bubbling, I don't want to pour those right away. I want to let them settle for just a little while because hot air rises. So when you're mixing in color, if you mixed in any air bubbles, they're all going to rise to the surface and they're going to pop themselves. So I'm going to set these off to the side to settle for just a minute or so and grab my molds. So in this case, we're actually going to be using some freeform molds. This is ice. So I just crushed up some ice cubes right from my freezer, and this is what we're actually going to pour the Isomalt over to get all of the coral pieces. This is a technique that has been used a lot. It's kind of a classic, awesome technique. You may have seen it done before. It comes out super cool. I can honestly say that there's no bad pieces. There's no way to mess this up because it looks awesome no matter what you do. So I just filled my, I like to use silicone bowls for this as well because if the Isomalt touches the sides or pools to the bottom, it'll release super easy. But you could do it on a greased piece of foil if you wanted flatter pieces. You can also use taller vessels or containers so that you get longer, more deep kind of pieces. So depending on the shape of your ice to start with is going to vary kind of how it looks in the end. And also what kind of ice you're using. Like I said, I just crushed up some ice cubes, but if you used really, really crushed ice, it's going to look different. If you use different shaped ice cubes, it's going to look different. So it's cool to kind of play around and get different effects, but all we're going to do is pour the Isomalt on top. So now that this is settled and it's not boiling anymore, I'm just going to pour it over. Now, if we were using real boiled sugar for this, boiled sugar and water do not mix. It will completely dissolve almost instantly when you pour it over. Isomalt is still water soluble, so it is still going to dissolve in water, but only if the water is sitting on it for a very long time. So if I take these out in time and I'm going to glaze them with a clear edible glaze, it kind of locks out any extra moisture and your pieces will save beautifully. As you saw in my finished seahorse sculpture that I made about a week ago, it has not melted or broken down or anything, and it's not sticky anymore. You can experiment with layering different colors in this, so if I wanted to crisscross them and now pour some teal over the blue or some blue over the teal, you can absolutely do that. The nice part about these is that they dry, or they cool, really, really quickly because they're up against that freezing cold ice. So it's not going to take very long for these to set up. I can hear like a little bit of a sizzle or a crack, which is awesome. It's kind of all that ice melting. Okay, so we'll just let these cool for about 5 minutes or so, and as it's dripping, it's kind of melting the ice, which is cooling the isomalt, and it's going to give you these really craggly, textured kind of pieces that are perfect for waves, for splashes. If you did them in different colors or opaque colors, you could do corals, anything that you just want a really kind of rough, gnarly texture to, it's going to look awesome.
Hey,
so, yes?
Francis asked, would it be a water airbrush color or an alcohol-based color to color the isomalt?
You can use either water or alcohol-based color with Isomalt. I think the one I'm using is water-based, but I've used both and both work great. The only thing that you never ever want to mix into Isomalt is gel color. Gel-based colors that you need into gum paste and fondant will break down the Isomalt and it won't allow it to dry properly. Okay.
And Greta asked, other than a microwave, is there any other method for cooking the isomalt?
You can use either a microwave or a stove top. So if you want to just put it into a stainless steel pot over the stove and just start it at low and slowly bring the temperature up, that will work perfect. Alright, the next pieces we're going to do are going to be our focal points. Our stars of our show is going to be our seahorses. So these are silicone molds just like before, so you don't need to grease them or powder them or anything. All you're going to do is pour it in. Now you see how I have the left facing and right facing seahorse? That is going to be so that they're looking at each other, because this would be perfect for like a wedding cake topper if you did all the corals and like pearls and clear or white. How pretty would it be to have the two kind of bride and groom, so to speak, on top of your, cake. So that's why I did the two that are looking at each other. Alright, and then I'm using a nice bright orange Isomalt. I wanted it to contrast really, really strongly with my cool blues and teals. And I did mix in some orange airbrush color, but then so that it's not see-through, I mixed in a powder. So another thing you can use to mix into Isomalt is going to be a powder, so in this case white petal dust, and that is what gives it that solid finish that looks more like porcelain or plastic rather than glass. So Isomalt is super versatile. There's so many different things you can do with it. Plus, there's tons of different painting techniques. You can pretty much paint anything sticky onto Isomalt. So you see I just poured that in, and then rather than risking overflowing the mold to get it into all these crevices, I'm just going to use a little silicone tool, or you can use a toothpick or a skewer to just push the excess Isomalt in. Don't worry about rough edges. I'm actually going to put some on there on purpose so I can show you how easy it is to clean up afterwards. Just like that. And do the same thing for this other little guy here. And that will be perfect. So these are going to take probably about 10 minutes or so to cool. Alright, and again, not worrying if I did overflow it, because we can trim completely if we needed to. We can smooth, we can do a lot with Isomalt. Alright, so we're going to set these off to the side for about 10 minutes or so, and we will come back to them in just a minute. Okay. And worst comes to worst, remember that Isomalt can be remelted. So if you really didn't like how they came out, or you made a whole bunch of decorations and didn't end up using them, you can just remelt them and use them again. Super easy.
Sidney, just can you refresh what colors you were using?
Yes, I was using liquid airbrush colors for the transparent pieces, so that's going to be a water or alcohol-based color, a turquoise, and a nice royal blue. And then for the seahorses, I used a little bit of orange airbrush color, but to get it opaque, I used a petal dust, a white petal dust. And then you can also, instead of the petal dust, mix in pearl dust to give it that shimmery look for the bubbles. Okay, so our pieces should be cool. I don't want to test it with my finger, just in case, because you don't want it to still be hot. I'm going to use a tool, just kind of tap on the Isomalt, make sure it's solid. This is going to get a little messy, but it's okay. We're allowed to get messy here. Sometimes the best pieces are made when you make a mess, right? So I'm just kind of flexing the bowl to make sure nothing's stuck to it. I'm going to pull out all of my ice pieces here. And there you go. Oh my gosh, look how cool that is. So you could see it just wrapped around and melted through that ice and gave it such a cool kind of energy to it. Sometimes you'll get little pieces of ice that are stuck in between the Isomalt. So what I want to do is just try and kind of grab those out. If I can't, then I'll just put it off to the side and kind of upside down and let the water melt out till it's small enough to remove. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can also just break this piece apart, because the cool thing is it's, you know, not perfect, right? If you break it and put it back together, sometimes that's almost good because you can put it back together in the exact format that you want it to fit your piece. So I'm just going to set him off to the side and see if that melts, but if not, we'll break him apart. I have some paper towels over here that I'm just going to set it on to dry for a couple minutes.
Sidney, can you paint cocoa butter on it, or will it melt it?
No, you can absolutely paint cocoa butter on it, because cocoa butter's melting temperature is way lower than Isomalt's, so it will not melt it. Okay, so now for our blue piece here, I'm just gonna kind of grab all these extra pieces. This is a pretty big piece of ice, and I don't want to risk it pooling and eating through the Isomalt, and since it's just held on by this one little arm, I'm just going to snap that off to release that ice cube. I don't want to get rid of these pieces though. I want to save them because it makes them super, super nice for kind of filling in excess spots. Sometimes you get gaps and things.
Somebody asked, doesn't it get sticky?
It does get a little bit sticky. That is what I'm going to do next, is I'm going to take that stickiness away with some glaze. So let me move this guy out of the way.
Sidney, how much time before you removed it from the ice?
It was about 5 minutes, depending on how much Isomalt you poured in there will depend on how long it takes. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is spray it with a clear edible glaze spray. So this is just an edible glaze, and that is going to basically lock out any excess moisture and coat the surface of it so that it's going to completely make it so that it's not sticky anymore and it will stay nice and shiny. So I want to let these pieces dry for probably about 5 to 10 minutes before I do that, just so that there's no water pooled on the surface at that point when I'm glazing. Otherwise it'll just mix together and not really do what it's supposed to. So I just let it dry until it doesn't feel, the pieces don't feel slick anymore. They feel kind of tacky but not wet, and then I will just spray it. Now make sure when you spray this glaze that you are going to spray it away from any of your tools. You don't want to spray it in your mold, spray it near your mat, your work surface. I pretty much cover my entire table when I'm done, or I have a separate table with plastic or paper towels or something that I don't care that this gets on, because this is edible, but it doesn't like to come off of things very easy. So make sure your phone's not around it, your watch or anything. Spray the pieces and let them dry.
Sid,
yes.
Can we rewatch this broadcast?
Yes, you can go back and rewatch it. It'll be up, I believe, on the Facebook page, so you can see it again.
And you can use powdered colors?
Sorry, guys. Yes, you can use powdered colors. You can use petal dust or luster dust. Just remember that they're not going to be as see-through as an airbrush color. So petal dust will be more of a solid finish, like my Seahorses here, whereas the liquid colors are going to be the nice transparent finish.
Okay, and if you were to get boiled sugar to the hardball stage, would it work the same as an Isomalt structure?
It is. You want to get it to the hard crack stage. That's going to be this most similar to Isomalt if you're using real sugar. You can do all these techniques with real sugar. It will work fine. Pouring over ice, you're going to have a very short lifespan with it if you're using real sugar, but everything else you can do the same. The big difference is Isomalt holds up way, way better to humidity and to moisture. So if you are in any sort of humidity, I'm based here in Florida, so obviously lots and lots of humidity, and I've worked all around the world with different kind of climates and humidity levels to work with my recipe, but real sugar does not really have any stability in humidity or moisture, and it's going to completely melt within about an hour. So that's really the whole shelf life that you have, whereas Isomalt, it's going to hold up. I mean, you saw the sculpture I made last week, and it was still beautiful. It hadn't melted, broken down, or even gotten cloudy because I glazed it. So I do recommend working with Isomalt, but if you don't mind it only having about an hour shelf life, you could replicate these with real sugar. Now I want to show you another glass piece that I did here. So this is going to be a clear one that I poured earlier because I pre-poured a couple pieces to have them ready. And you see how super cool it comes out in clear. I just love how bright and shiny it reflects that light. So it looks cool in lots of different textures and colors and, you know, opaque versus see-through. Okay, let's see. So while those are drying off before I would spray them, I'm going to check on my sphere. It should be about cool. So I'm going to go ahead and unwrap him. So taking off my rubber bands, and then I just slowly open up. There we go. So you see that half of our sphere and that beautiful pearl sheen in there. Alright, so this mold, I'll just put it off to the side and I can always use it again. Okay, these little extra pieces I'm just going to trim off. So I'm going to use my scissors, and you can see it just pops right off. You could also use the torch to smooth that over a little bit, but I didn't even really need to. And there you go, you have your perfect bubble every single time.
Sidney, Lorna would like to know if Isomalt is edible.
Isomalt is completely edible. It is made from beets, so it's a byproduct of beet sugar, and it's 100% edible and 100% sugar-free, which means it's safe for anyone who can't have sugar, which is always a good thing as well. But yeah, it's basically when they make beet sugar, this is the byproduct of it, and they extract all the sugar from it.
And candies.
Yeah, they use it for like sugar-free Jolly Ranchers here in the States. They use it for like cough drops and pretty much anything you want hard candy form without the sugar added to it.
Louise needs to make a water fountain. How could she make the water look realistic? Do you have any tips?
Oh, Isomalt is perfect for that. You could do lots of different things. You can just pour it out onto your mat and then wait for it to cool a little bit and pick it up with your gloved hands and then manipulate it. You can do it poured over ice. I think that would be perfect if you just had pieces like this, even if you broke that up a little bit, and then you can piece it exactly where you want that splatter to kind of go in a certain spot. Maybe I'll do a whole episode about all different ways that you can do water. If you guys would be interested in that, we could absolutely do that, because you can also pull it and hand sculpt it. Lots of different things. Alright, so these, I like the two-part molds for this because, as you can see, there's a hole in the bottom of my bubble. I'm not really going to worry about that, that's just where I'm going to attach it for this project, but it makes it super cool if you want to add a filling inside of it. So if you wanted to do like a cool fruit filling or a ganache or a cream or anything that you wanted inside, and then you just break the Isomalt sphere and then you'd have that filling inside. You can flavor the Isomalt, so an oil-based flavoring is going to be best for working with Isomalt. So just put a couple drops of an oil-based flavoring, like here in the States we use the Lorraine candy oils a lot, those work perfect, and that's going to flavor your Isomalt. Don't taste test it while it's liquid, while the Isomalt's liquid. Pour a teeny tiny little mold, or you know, pour some out onto the mat and let it cool, and then you can test it to see how much you want to add. It doesn't take very much, but if you wanted to do this a flavor that complemented the filling flavor, you could do that. You could also fill it with a glitter, an edible glitter. You could fill it with sprinkles and then put them on ice cream and smash them, and they can go everywhere. You can also just put like a light inside of these. With a lot of my pieces, I do like color changing lights, which looks awesome with these pearl colored or clear ones. You can do flickering lights, make it kind of really, really pretty and elegant. So many different things you can do with these, but they're going to work perfect for our bubbles next to our seahorses.
Sidney, could you use a small balloon for the bubble?
You can actually use balloons. You can dip water balloons filled with cold water into Isomalt as well, and it will coat the outside. Just be careful not to get any water on the Isomalt when you're draining it. That's a technique originally invented by Chef Vanessa Greeley. It's awesome. And yeah, you can dip it and then leave it. It's not going to give you quite as perfect of a sphere just because it's going to be slightly off. You know, balloons aren't perfect like a mold would be, but it definitely would give you a bubble effect.
Sidney,
Alright.
Everyone is voting for a water episode.
A water episode? Okay, I'm gonna get started on all the different like ways that you can do Isomalt as soon as this is done, and I will definitely do that for you guys. I know Isomalt uses water a lot, so that would definitely be perfect. We can cover some cake boards, do some waterfalls, some splashes, some fountains. Oh, that's fun. I'm excited now. Okay, let's see. So we have our coral, we have our bubbles. Now I want to test our seahorses. So I'm tapping my seahorses, but I can feel they still make, I don't know if you guys can see that, they still make a teeny tiny dent with my tool. Now normally I would let pieces cool for longer if that happened, but I actually want to take these guys out a little bit early and shape them a little bit so that they're not, I mean, they look beautiful just flat like this, but I really like adding some more life into my pieces whenever I can, especially with something that's going to be in the water, lots of movement. So you can see if I take it out early, it's bendable. I'm just going to give him a slight shape. just so that he's not completely flat, and that'll add a lot of movement into your piece. Now you can see these rough edges. I will get rid of those in a little bit too.
Sydney, Marie Isabel would like to know, if you put an electric candle in there, is there a time limit before it melts?
There shouldn't be, because Isomalt is going to melt at about 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And unless it's a real candle, it should, tends to be what they're made out of now, it should be totally fine. You may just want to do a test. If it is going to be set out for hours, you just may want to try it to make sure with your specific ones that you buy. Do a little, test beforehand, but you shouldn't. I've never had any problem with it.
Sydney, a couple of people say their things are frozen. I noticed because everybody in the world is on their computers right now. They just need to refresh.
Okay, cool. Yeah, refresh your page if it is frozen, but you can still hear me. Alright, so this guy got a little cool because I was working on the other one, and it's not bendable, so I'm going to show you guys how I reheat it, and also how I clean up these edges, because it's going to be the same pretty much technique. I'm just going to torch over the back, so I put my piece face down, okay? And then I'm just very, very lightly with my chef's torch tracing the edges, and that is what's going to smooth over those rough edges. This is also going to add heat, so instead of letting this cool back down all the way, I can pick it up a little bit early and bend it. So I'm not just torching the edges for this, since I do want to bend it, I'm going to be torching the center as well. You don't want to pick it up right away because you just blowtorched it. That would not be good. So even with gloved hands, not a good habit to get into. So let it cool for just a minute or two and then you can try it. I'm going to also, now that this guy has hardened into place, I'm going to flip him over and just clean up his edges very lightly. If you had a really big rough edge or a spill or overflow that didn't disappear just with the torch, after this step, so you let it cool for a minute, just like I said I'm doing now, you can pick it up and the whole thing will be a little pliable, and you can just trim it with scissors and any rough edges will go away. Okay, so let's test this guy. I can always torch more if I need to. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to flip him back over so I can kind of see how they're going to look together. Alright, and just give him a little bit of shape. Perfect. So I'm just kind of making them complementary. Seahorses have kind of really twisty, fluid bodies, so I want to make sure that they look as realistic as possible. Now, because I reheated, this is very, very soft and hot right now. It would cool at room temperature, but if you have a little battery-operated fan, it's going to make it super nice to just speed up that cooling time.
Somebody asked if they can use a heat gun.
You can't really use a heat gun with Isomalt. It's not hot enough, so that's why I use a blowtorch. A heat gun is really good for chocolate, but it's not going to be hot enough for Isomalt. So I recommend a chef's blowtorch like you would use for creme brulee.
And could you join the seahorses together to make one whole one?
Absolutely, you could, yeah. If you wanted to, instead of shaping them, you can put the two halves together, and then I would just heat up with my torch a little and use my silicone tools to just blend all of the seams away.
What else can you use if you don't have a torch?
The torch is kind of vital to working with Isomalt. For certain things like gluing together, you can dip into liquid Isomalt and stick pieces together, but for anything that you want to smooth, or, the torch is kind of vital with working with Isomalt, so I would recommend having a torch if you're going to be doing some detailed pieces like this.
Some people use an alcohol lamp, but you can't point it.
Right, yeah, some people do use like an alcohol burner that you can hold pieces over, which will work, but yeah, I like a torch because you can point it down at the piece and not have to be holding it in your hands. It's a little bit scarier, and your pieces can also flop and things like that, so that's why I use the torch.
See blue.
Yes, some people can't see blue. That is another reason why I don't use it, because my mom actually can't see blue, so, and the flames are blue, so it would not be good if someone were to swipe their hand or arm over it, not seeing it. Alright, put my fan back here. Now these look really, really pretty, but I do want to add a little bit more definition to them. They're not quite standing out or popping enough for me right now. I'm going to go ahead and paint them up just a tiny bit because I wanted to show you guys how you can use paints on Isomalt as well. And again, I'm planning to do a whole episode just on coloring and painting techniques, but just for a little overview, pretty much you can use anything sticky with Isomalt. Isomalt is not porous, it's like painting on glass, so you don't want to use anything dry, like a dry petal dust will not stick, it will just brush away. You can use a dry luster dust because it has a little tackiness since it's made for chocolate. You can use it dry, it's going to be more intense wet, less intense dry, depending on what you want. It's more of an iridescent finish if you just dry dust things. You can also use edible acrylic paints, you can use airbrushing. Airbrushing looks beautiful on these, and you can use gel colors, so that's what I'm going to use. Now remember I said you cannot use gel color mixed into the Isomalt, but it works great for painting on top. So I'm just using Artisan Accents Snow White gel color here. I'm going to add a little to a cup. And you can paint this directly, but a lot of times gel colors are going to be a little bit gel, right? They're going to be thick, so they're not really going to paint on smoothly. So I use the Artisan Accents dilution solution, and that is just going to thin it down. It actually is supposed to turn their gel colors into airbrush colors, which works great, but I mostly use it for painting because it makes it paint on really, really smooth. So I'm just going to use a nice flat brush here. Mix that up, and then I'm going to take off most of that paint from my paintbrush, and I'm not going to poke at it. I'm going to take my brush from the side, and I'm just going to let it kind of catch on all the ridges of the seahorse. So any indents are not going to take the color, since the brush can't get down to them. It'll only catch on the high points, and it just is an instant, easy, natural shading effect.
Do you spray it before you paint it?
I'm going to spray it after I paint it, because you can paint over the glaze, but it doesn't allow it to stick as nicely. So I like to spray, and also the spray will lock in the paint so that it's not going to smudge all over your fingers when you pick it up. Alright, so if you're in a super, super humid area, you may want to make your pieces one at a time, just so that you can make paint spray right away. You don't want these sitting out too long without being glazed if you're in a humid area, because that's when they can start getting sticky. Isomalt is hygroscopic, so it's going to suck in moisture the longer it's out in the air. So it's not going to dry off eventually, it'll actually keep getting sticky if you don't glaze it. Okay, so you can see the difference in the two seahorses. It's still really pretty either way, but I always like to add shading onto my pieces. I just think that that's what adds so much life and just so much detail and makes the pieces really, really pop. So that's just gonna be all I do for this piece today, but of course you could go even more in depth if you wanted to add shadows, if you wanted to add different shades of color. I'm gonna do this one just a tiny bit darker, just so you can have some variation here. Seahorses are animals, right? They're not always gonna be exactly the same. Just get his little head. And of course, just like anything in art, there's so many different ways you can interpret this. Imagine doing these in different colors, shading with different colors. I could take some nice reds or some yellows over him. That would be beautiful. Different shades of orange if I wanted to keep it all in the orange family.
Sid, Jackie would like to know, if you join them together, would you use the same method as the bubble? Or would you do them separately?
I would make them separately, and then I would glue them together after they're already made. Preferably when they're still a little soft, like how I took these out to bend them, so that they form together nice and easy. They're not too rigid.
Lisa would like to know if you can eat the glaze, for instance, on a lollipop.
Absolutely you can. It's an edible glaze, so it's all completely edible. Okay. So there is my two little seahorses here. I'm going to set them off to the side. Like I said, if I was going to be leaving these out for a little while, I would glaze them now. Because I'm about to put everything all together and glaze it after that, I am going to wait and just glaze the whole piece, because the glaze can keep pieces from sticking together as strong. Now, nothing on this piece is particularly heavy, so it's not as big of a deal today, but for other projects where your pieces are going to be really, really supporting each other, the glazing after you put it all together is going to be your strongest bet, so the Isomalt can stick directly to the Isomalt with no barrier in between being the glaze. Okay, so this is the super fun part where we get to start putting it all together. I'm going to use liquid Isomalt as a glue, so you can see because it's in a silicone bowl, I just crack the edges here and put it all back into the bowl, and then I will reheat that to get it back to a liquid. So just pop that back in, and like I said, Isomalt can be remelted as many times as you want. There's really no limit, and it makes it great for practice. If you just want to make practice pieces, make something, melt it back down, make something again, melt it back down, make different pieces, or make the same thing to really kind of practice your skills. If you want to make display pieces for your portfolio or your website, and then make other pieces after that, you can remelt them afterwards. There's really no waste when it comes with Isomalt. Okay, so I'm going to start grabbing some of the pieces that I pre-made here. So I just have an array of different coral pieces. You never know what you're going to need, so I don't really get rid of any until I'm done. Even the little pieces that may have broken, I always keep those. Okay.
Sidney, Gina would like to know, what is the tip to make them stick after they are glazed?
You just want to use more heat and more glue. So I would torch the pieces and really torch them to make them stick together. Or when you're dipping and sticking together, if you torch both pieces first, so for instance with this piece here that already has glaze on it, I'd torch it a little bit, torch this piece where it's going to stick a little bit, then dip and stick. It will kind of burn the glaze away in that specific spot and allow it to bond stronger. Okay.
Melanie would like to know, if you make it in advance, how do you store the pieces?
To store the pieces, you want to glaze them, like I said, so spray them with the glaze and let them dry, and then an airtight container is going to be best. You can use like those little desiccant packs that take moisture out of like vitamin bottles and shoe boxes. Make sure if you're using ones you already have that they are food grade ones. They're not ones from shoe boxes. They are, you know, ones made for vitamins and, you know, things like that. You can put those in there, but it's not necessary to have those. Just throw them into the box and keep it tight and it'll be fine.
Sid, if the used Isomalt gets cloudy, will remelting it make it clear again?
Yes, it will. So if you don't glaze your pieces and they do cloud over, or if you're just playing around and you notice your piece is clouded, it's fine. It's just the moisture, but when you remelt it back to a liquid, all of that goes away. So you don't have to worry about glazing pieces you're planning to remelt or anything like that. If they do get cloudy, just melt them back down and it will be fine. Now, pieces that are glazed, I try not to remelt those because the glaze will mix into the Isomalt and it can thin the texture. So those, if you glaze them again after a few weeks or a few months, depending on your humidity, once they start getting a little cloudy, it should go right back to shiny. Okay. Now we have a little bit of extra time, so really quickly I want to show you guys my original piece I did not put on a base, but if you wanted to put this on a base or you know, some kind of board, I want to show you guys how to imprint. So I just poured this before. These are my flex form molds. So they're basically just strips of silicone that I put on a non-stick baking liner. Okay, I'm just going to take those off now that the piece is cool. And this is going to be my base. So all I did was pour into that flex form and then let it cool and it peels right off. Now I have a little bit of texture from the mat. I'm going to torch that away. So you can see it's just melting that texture and those bubbles. And then you could leave this clear, or you can imprint it with a silicone texture mat. So what I'm actually going to do is get this nice and hot and almost boiling on the surface. I'm going to take my silicone impression mat, so this is just a little flexible impression. I'm going to lay it immediately onto the Isomalt. Just let it cool there for a second and peel it away. And you see how easily it took that impression? I'm just going to do a little bit over here. I don't worry about matching the edges up because I am not that particular with patterns like this that are going to be random. And then that's a really pretty effect, but I usually like to use it from the other side. So this is the textured side, but this is the smooth side. And you see how much that pops. You could go over that with some paint if you wanted to highlight it even more. But I'm going to go ahead and build this right onto my sculpture. So just starting with some of my big pieces, you want to kind of space the colors balanced. I always try and start putting my pieces together first just to see where I'm going to put them, since once you attach them, they're attached. You can't really reposition. And actually what I'm going to go ahead and do, instead of using the liquid Isomalt, because these are not very heavy, I'm just going to torch and stick for these. I'll use my liquid Isomalt when I put my heavier seahorses on. So I'm going to torch and just stick. Anywhere that it's touching you want to torch. So I can feel it's touching the base here, but then it's also, after I attach that, it's touching these two together. So I'm just going to torch and start sticking pieces on. I tend to keep the clearer pieces for the top because it kind of almost adds like a foam effect. Of course, being very, very careful, wearing your gloves, not following my bad example. Okay, and I'm just piecing them in. Sometimes I break apart different pieces to make them fit better if they need to. But a lot of times, if you just keep playing around with them, they'll all balance out. Put a clear one down here. So I'm kind of torching both pieces at the same time. Then torching over pieces that are already touching. I know you're looking down on it, but I'll kind of pick that up so you can start to see I'm building like a little nest for my seahorses to sit in.
Somebody would like you to do hand-molded flowers.
Oh, okay, that's good. Once we get into some pulling and hand sculpting techniques, I can absolutely do some flowers.
And they should probably list some ideas too.
Yeah, if you guys have any ideas, I've been thinking of tons of stuff, but I'm always open to suggestions or ideas. If you guys think of anything you'd like to learn, feel free to write it down in the comments. I'll go through and look afterwards, so I love different ideas. All right. Get this one more piece over here. And I think that'll be just about good. So I'm just torching. You can also go back with like a toothpick or a silicone tool and scoop a little bit of liquid glue and kind of almost add band-aids anywhere that you needed to, if you wanted to add some extra glue. This was kind of sticking out weird, so I'm just breaking off some of these little pieces here. And I'm going to tuck one more piece kind of into the back.
Sidney Heidi says, "This is so fun. I almost feel like I'm at ISIS or CookieCon, except I'm not dressed."
Hi Heidi. I know, it's almost better in that way, right? To do all of it in your pajamas.
We just miss everybody.
I know. That's the best part about live streams, is I get to see everybody's comments and see your projects. If you guys ever make anything with our Isomalt after, I love to see your different projects, so make sure that you tag me in pictures, or if you make a piece inspired by this piece, please tag me in pictures.
Jackie says she loves how you don't need gloves anymore. Is that from years of working with the medium?
It really is. From about 13 years of working, my hands do not feel heat anymore. And yeah, I can just not necessarily stick my finger in it, but I definitely am still being careful, but I definitely don't have the same heat sensitivity that I used to. Okay. I'm pretty much done with my coral pieces, or my splash pieces, whatever you want to call them. It's kind of an abstract piece, so that's what it looks like from the front. And when I turn my camera back up front, I will show you guys the front view as well. So I'm going to attach my seahorses. So again, just figuring out where they're going to go. And these I am going to dip just to show you the difference. These aren't too heavy, so I think you could probably do either. But I'm just going to stick them in. So I'm just catching a little glue on the back. I'm not dipping them straight in. I'm kind of pushing it backwards into the glue to make sure that I'm not getting any on the front. But it's just going to look like a water splash anyway, so not too big of a deal if you do. Hold those for just a second. You can take your fan to it if you want to cool it really quick, just to make sure that they're not going to go anywhere.
Sidney, Vicky would like to know if you can use any silicone mold.
You can use any high heat and food safe silicone mold. If you're not sure about the mold that you have and you can't contact the company, usually you can and just ask them, but if you're not sure where you got it from, usually what I'll do is, like on the back of a mold or on the side, I'll pour a little bit of Isomalt, let it cool, and if it releases, then it should be good. If it doesn't, you can just rinse it away with water and you didn't ruin or melt the cavity of your mold. You've just got a little mark on the back or the side.
And Marie Isabel would like to know, can you mix mediums like modeling chocolate with Isomalt?
Absolutely. The only thing with mixing mediums is you have to be careful about melting points, because if you try and put liquid Isomalt onto chocolate, it's not going to work so well, but you could put modeling chocolate pieces in here, you can paint chocolate onto this, you can put fondant and gum paste bases or decorations into Isomalt. Isomalt is very friendly, it likes other mediums, so I do a lot of mixed mediums as well, and I'm sure I will be doing some in our future. Yes, let me type it up before I put my bubbles on. So there's what we look like so far. Alright, could you grab me that other bubble over there? I just forgot to bring him over. Ah, I'm stuck. There we go. Okay, so now I'm gonna just position my bubbles here where I want them. Of course, you could do as many as you want. I don't want to overpower the seahorses too much, so I'm just gonna do a couple here. So again, you want to make sure that they're all spaced nicely. Okay. So I'm just going to torch and stick with these as well.
Sidney, Sandra would like to know, once you've made it, how long will it keep in a sealed container?
If you keep it in a sealed container and it's glazed, it really Isomalt doesn't go bad. It should last for weeks, if not months. Honestly, I've even had pieces for years and nothing has happened, even here in Florida.
Sidney, did you make the molds or did you buy them?
These molds are my line of silicone molds from seemycakes.com. So I did design these and we manufacture them, but you can use whatever molds that you have at home. Of course, I'm biased and I like these, but I think it'd be beautiful with lots of different ones. Alright, so I'm just attaching and holding these. These are very, very lightweight since they are hollow, so you don't have to worry too much about adding extra glue. Okay, so while these are cooling, if you guys have any other questions, please write them in the chat. Yes.
Louise would like to know, can she catch the other demos you've done and where?
You can, yes. They're on my Facebook page. They're on the Cakeflix Facebook page. The last one that I did here on Cakeflix, I did a blown Isomalt peacock. That was super, super fun. And so that, I believe, is back on the Facebook page for Cakeflix.
And on your YouTube.
Yes, and on my YouTube channel as well. There's a link on my website. That is going to, you can also just search my name, Sidney Galpern, but I have all of my past. I do Isomalt playdates, and those are hands-on demo days just like this.
And Dale would like to know if you have different size bubble molds.
There we go. We do, yes. This is our small one, and we also have a medium and a large. So depending on if you're doing it on a cake or just a sculpture. Alright, so now, like I was saying, is when I will spray this with the clear edible glaze. So remember, using your clear edible glaze, move all your tools away, move everything away, spray this whole piece. Sometimes you may need to do 2 coats if you're in a super humid environment. Generally 1 to 2 coats is fine for me, depending on the humidity level that day if it's raining. But I would spray this, let it dry a couple minutes, and that's going to lock in the paint. It's going to lock out the excess moisture, and it's just going to make sure everything is going to be nice and sealed so that your piece will stay beautiful. Alright, I'm going to tilt the camera back up here so that I can show you guys what it looks like from the front and answer any final questions. So write any final questions in the chat.
Lisa just said, tell her that she misses seeing your sweet face and put the camera up.
I miss you too. That's so funny. Alright, now I can see everybody's comments. Awesome.
Margarita says, hi, beautiful friend, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Hi, Margarita. Yes, I'm so excited. Make sure everybody go on. Every night this week, they're having more demonstrations here at the same time. Margarita's tomorrow. I'm so excited to watch you, Margarita. I love your demos.
Hi, Margarita.
And on Saturday all day is Caking Around the World.
Yeah, make sure that you guys go check that out. Cakeflix is awesome. They do so many live tutorials, and I'm super, super excited. So I'm going to hold my sculpture up here so you guys can see it from the front. A little bit different than the original one I did, but that's the best part about art, right? Is that you can make 2 pieces and they're always going to be different. I'll zoom it in here. The lights are making it super, super bright, but those seahorses are nice and vibrant.
Tanya would like to know, how do you recommend getting the spray in the little fine cracks?
The spray is very, very fine in itself, so it really should fill in those cracks no problem. What you can do is spray it from different angles. So I'm not just spraying it from the front. I'm going to spray it from the back, from the sides, the top. Sometimes with specific pieces, I'll spray the front and let it dry and then flip it around. That will help to get it from different angles. Luckily with this project, because it is so much going on, it's very busy. There's lots of crevices and kind of cracks and different little holes in it. If a little spot doesn't get glazed, it's not the end of the world. It may get a little cloudy, but it still kind of looks cool. I actually have one over here if you guys want to see it. This is one that I made when I originally made my piece, and I just kept it in case I needed it. This is the front that I glazed, so you can see it's still nice and shiny. This is the back that didn't get glazed, and it just got a little bit clouded. Now again, if I melted that back down, it would be fine, but it doesn't look bad. I mean, it just adds a little bit of variation and a little bit of opacity to it. Alright, so that would be perfect to, just as far as uses. Of course, it's a sculpture, it's a centerpiece, but you can use this on a cake. I think this would be beautiful if you did a cake topper, and then you did bubbles or pieces of coral cascading down the cake, or using those little coral pieces or the wave pieces for borders. You can use that water pouring over ice technique for cupcakes if you wanted to, so putting it on top of cupcakes. If you wanted to make a whole bunch at once, you can pour a sheet pan, so line a sheet pan with greased foil, cooking spray greased foil, line it with ice, pour a whole big sheet, and then just break it up into pieces, and you can make a whole bunch at once that way. And so yeah, you can basically see, I'll show you guys again, all of the different detail on it. Those bubbles could be filled with something, like I said. You can put color changing lights or flickering lights in them. Yeah, just lots and lots of different things, and I'm sure you guys will think of lots of stuff too. I think that the coral pieces or the wave pieces would be cool if you did them, you know, as like fireworks, or, you know, you can do lots of different effects. You can paint on top of them, you can airbrush it to get color variations. So how cool would it be if they were all blues and greens, but then the very edges were white? You could go back and paint it. So many different ideas.
What's the best way to attach the pieces to the sides of the cake?
You can attach the pieces of Isomalt to the side of a fondant-covered cake with Isomalt. So liquid Isomalt will melt right into the fondant. If you're worried about your pieces falling off the sides if they're heavy, or if you're doing this on a buttercream cake and you can't just put liquid Isomalt on the side, it'll melt down. What I would do is, let me grab a piece here. These would be, no, you could probably still do it on these, but with like the seahorses and stuff that are a little bit more solid of a background, I would dip and stick. Imagine this is a toothpick or a wire, or you can use a piece of uncooked spaghetti if you want an edible version. Dip it into liquid Isomalt and just stick it to the back and let it cool, and then you have a prong that inserts into the cake. Of course, make sure that whoever's eating the cake or cutting the cake knows that that's in there. You can also use a lollipop stick, and then they can take them out, and these would be lollipops, which would be kind of cool. That would give you extra support if it's not something that's more on the lightweight side.
How long will it last on a cake?
It'll last pretty much days, weeks, months. I don't put this in the refrigerator. I make sure all my Isomalt pieces go on after it comes out of the fridge, just because when you take it out, the condensation will make the Isomalt go cloudy, because it's basically liquid sitting on the surface. So make sure your pieces go on afterwards, and ideally, if it's in a room temperature environment, they should be fine.
Karen would like to know, will Isomalt make royal icing rocks and coral?
Yes, it will. Yeah, you can give it, there's a technique where you can mix it with royal icing. You can do that with sugar, and it gives it like a craggly look. You can also pour Isomalt right onto hardened royal icing, which is really cool. It shouldn't melt it. Yeah, there's lots of different ways you could do that.
Royal icing piped on it is gorgeous.
Yeah, you can pipe on top of it. So you can pipe on top of it with anything. Chocolate, royal icing, buttercream, lots of different things. Cocoa butter. Alright.
Just waiting for any last minute questions.
Yeah, if you guys ever have questions about working with See Isomalt specifically, or just Isomalt in general, please feel free to message me, add me on Facebook, follow me on Instagram, and I will be happy to answer any questions. You can send me pictures of what you're doing. I love to share different Isomalt projects. If you do a piece that's inspired by this, or anything like that, just make sure that you tag me, because I love seeing all of your creations. And make sure that you come back and tune in to Cakeflix TV. There's lots of awesome shows that are going to be on it. My show is going to be every Wednesday starting in 2 weeks, Sidney's Sweet Adventures. We're going to be doing lots more Isomalt projects, as well as chocolate, cake, confections, so many different things. And eventually, hopefully, we will be traveling again, so I'll take you to all the different conventions, cake shows, classes, competitions. Everywhere I go, I will take you guys with me. So I'll go back through and read the comments if there's any questions that I missed. Thank you again so much to Cakeflix Live TV and to Paul and David. This is such a cool idea, and I am so honored to be here. And